Action Jackson.
Action Jackson. Who's Jackson?
I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. Oh, I am for real.
Anyway, welcome to our special Bloodborne segment. We've both been clamoring for this game to come out. Obsessively waiting. Now it is upon us. Been playing it all week. I probably put a good fucking 15-20 hours into it. I would say maybe not quite that much, but
yeah, I've maybe put 10 at the most. Only like 3 or 4 days, but like maybe 2 or 3 hours at a time.
Yeah.
And then the night a couple nights ago we played from
till
about
5 in the morning.
Yeah, I think we started at like 10, 11, and then just played till 5 o'clock in the morning. And everybody except for you had work the next day, and
that's the only
you got up earlier than I did.
I know. I still got up at like 10 just so I didn't throw my whole sleep pattern off.
Yeah.
So
yeah, let's introduce what is Bloodborne. Bloodborne is a new action RPG by From Software, the people who brought you Demon's Souls, Dark Souls 1, and Dark Souls 2.
Yep.
Dark Souls 1 is just called Dark Souls, if you're looking for it. Not Dark Souls 1. That could fuck you up and ruin your deal. It's a particularly cult following that people... it's kind of a game all of its own. It's not like any other game for the most part.
Brutal difficulty is what really sets it apart from like your standard action RPGs.
Yeah.
So... it definitely creates this cult following of people who kind of want that. They're like glutton for the punishment and enjoy just kind of getting their ass handed to them repeatedly, learning from their mistakes, and then trying new tactics and strategies. It doesn't hold your hand at all. It doesn't ever tell you where to go.
But it doesn't. It gives you enough difficulty to make it doable with some intelligence. Like, you have to strategize. You have to figure out, because there are so many different variables as far as like what kind of weapon you're using, what kind of range it has, if you have ranged weapons. During this conversation, I'll probably mention some stuff that happens in the other games just to talk about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're all kind of... I mean, this little dude here's from Dark Souls 2, actually.
Yeah, this is the Collector's Edition Dark Souls 2 guy, and then I just got the Collector's Edition Bloodborne game, which comes with an art book, and that's pretty much it. Steelbook case, stuff that not that big of a deal, but there is a European collector's edition, and I just heard that they are coming out with the strategy guide officially.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I watched a video today, and what they're doing is they're postponing it until the first patch comes out. So the first patch is supposed to come out in like a week, or in about a week, or this week, probably Monday through Friday. It'll come out eventually, and they're waiting because it's going to do a lot for the game.
They're probably going to be doing a lot of balancing and changing things around. And,
I think the wait times in between screens, the loading times, they're going to try to help that. They're going to fix the glitch in the forest where if you... it has to do with if you beat the boss before... You have to do something, and then if you beat the boss, it doesn't give you the key that you need to progress in the game.
The Lunarium key. I actually just got that, so luckily that glitch did not affect me.
Oh, it didn't affect you? Yeah. Well, you have to do something else for it to happen. You have to do something in the level to not get it.
Yeah, I knew there was a glitch in that area, and they just recommended not playing in multiplayer at all, because that was where the issue was springing up, from what I read.
Yeah, it's something to do with multiplayer.
Once I got into the Lost Woods, I was like, well, I'll just play by myself then.
I think it's if you try to beat the boss with someone else, you don't get the key. So if you do it by yourself, you'll get it. But they're going to fix that glitch. And so then they're going to come out with the strategy guide that's going to have all the information from the first patch.
That's good.
All the adjustments.
The other Dark Souls games, especially the first Dark Souls, the guide was it was pretty accurate, but a lot of the information was useless after a few updates because they changed stats on weapons, they changed item placements and enemy placements. Yeah,
and they tend to nerf really high-end stuff for the PvP. Yeah. So like the Crystal Sword spell was like way too powerful or something, and people were complaining, and so they nerfed that, I guess, in Dark Souls 2. But I'm excited because that strat guide, just for collection's sake, I'm going to get it.
Yeah.
And when you get the official strategy guide, as far as I know from this video, you'll get a dynamic theme that's exclusive to
really?
that
That's cool.
guide.
That's almost worth it right there, too.
Yeah, it's super cool. So I think they'll probably just have the collector's edition version. They might not do a regular version. And so whenever that becomes available for pre-order, I'm going to get that. The person that I watch on YouTube for walkthroughs. They're called Epic Name Bro. It's a guy named Marcus, and he's worked on the Dark Souls 2 strat guide and the Bloodborne guide, and that's who I got that information from.
Cool.
So if you're on YouTube and you need a walkthrough or just information, or you want to check out YouTube, there's a lot of really good YouTubers out there making videos about Bloodborne and Dark Souls. But Epic Name Bro is the one that I've been going to. He's a lot of fun to watch and listen to, a wealth of information, and he loves the lore. So if you want to know about the lore, he talks about that too.
Yeah.
I actually will skip the lore while I'm playing the game, and then when I'm watching him do the walkthroughs,
you just listen to him.
I listen to him, and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense, because I don't get the lore very much. I only got.
Well, it's just like these it's just tidbits. They don't. It doesn't just come out and just tell you all this information. You just find little bits of it as you're playing.
Yeah.
And then like through exploring, you'll just see different things that have happened, like in the ruins that you're going through.
Yeah,
it's a really interesting storytelling method that they use.
It all fits in, and it's all very subtle, and it's all very like life. Like it's alive. Like you do certain things, like you know how I said you could get the flamethrower lantern gun thing? I couldn't get it because I had already like progressed too far in the story, and so I couldn't get that because everything in that game like affects everything else. As far
usually,
as
if you
goes.
if you kill a certain boss and certain events you can't affect them anymore because it's too late, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So, I imagine there's a lot of stuff that I've missed. That I mean, I'll probably start a whole new character in a whole fresh game when the guide comes out, just so I can try to enjoy like every little thing that I can. But this is the first From Software game since Demon's Souls that I went in kind of blind. Like Dark Souls 1 and 2, I had a guide from the get-go, so I kind of had a bunch of a fucking fountain of knowledge available to me. So I was able to find like everything and every little secret. But Demon's Souls, I never did a guide, and Demon's Souls was like my favorite one in that it was the first time I played a game like that. Nobody knew what to expect when it was coming out. I remember watching like gameplay trailers for it, and I was just like, that game looks really cool. It looks really interesting. And then I just remember everybody immediately started talking about how just unforgiving and difficult it was. And then I picked it up and started playing it and just got my ass beat a bunch. And then that's like the first game where I spent almost more time on like Wikia sites trying to learn things, because they don't explain anything to you in the game. You just figure it out through guess and check, and just using your brain to figure out how these things affect other things. But by now, I mean, with Bloodborne, I know what to expect going into it. I know how scaling works and like all this other stuff that other games don't use. So, but how do you feel about Bloodborne? How are you enjoying it? What do you like? What do you don't like?
Sure.
Compared to, I guess, like the Dark Souls games, I feel like that's where everybody draws those comparisons.
I played Dark Souls 2 the most. I like New Game Plus did. I had a couple characters, like at least 100 hours in that game, and I got very into it. I actually color-coded and highlighted the strat guide with highlighters related to different types of items, like anything related to faith build. It would be yellow, so awesome. I got very into that game.
Way more than I did.
My ex-girlfriend at the time, it sort of just took over my life, and she would just always she never complained. She was just like, oh, like he's into that game, like you don't really realize it. But I really got into that game. And then Bloodborne, I'm really, really glad that it's not like Dark Souls 2 in the ways that it's not like Dark Souls 2.
Yeah.
To me, it's like they took everything from like Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, and Dark Souls 2 and really, really fucking polished it up. And so as far as the game, I fucking love it. A game that is challenging but rewarding, like to the maximum. I mean, it's just so much fun to beat a boss. It's one of the only games where I've had the situation where I get really stressed when I'm playing first-person shooter multiplayers because it's live.
Yeah.
And everything you do matters. In this game, it's the same way. Like when we're fighting a boss, I stop breathing. I start getting shaky at the end
your
of
heart
it.
just
You
starts
get
pounding.
super excited.
When you get that boss down to like that last quarter of their health, you're like, if I lose this right now,
I know, that's
I'm
why.
flip out.
Because if you lose, it's all over. And you fucking lose your souls, you lose your blood echoes, whatever the fuck you want to call them.
Yeah.
And you have to start over and make it back there. And I've lost so much progress. But at the same time, it's nice because sometimes you don't have a lot of blood echoes, and you die, and you're like, fuck it, like I don't even
You just
care. I
dive
don't
right
even
back
care.
in and-
Yeah, you just get back into it. But it's like it's that kind of balancing out of risk and reward that they just do super good. There's no other. They do it super well. Just so you know, not super
It's
good.
okay. I wasn't gonna judge you.
So I love it. I think it's easily my favorite game. Right now, it's probably gonna be my favorite game this year. And until like Dark Souls 2 comes out,
A couple weeks, or actually just like a week and a half.
Dark Souls
now.
2 is getting a remastered, essentially a Game of the Year edition with all the DLC and new item placement and bad guy placement with extra. What is it called? Extra descriptions on items, as well as
because some of the time, a lot of times, the
Yeah.
descriptions are very vague, so you just don't really understand what the item does. What I'm most excited about with essentially those remasters is they're supposed to run at 1080p, 60 frames per second.
Yeah, probably
They said that
faster load times.
They said the load times were like the PC, where it's
they are, yeah.
not like quite instantaneous, but like because Dark Souls 2,
Super quick. Yeah.
that it didn't feel like it was as polished as Dark Souls and Demon Souls because they were using a new engine, and I feel like that engine was designed to be used on
To be
better hardware. And so I think that like when I was playing it on the PS3, it just didn't feel that smooth, and the load times were really long, and it just didn't look as good like graphically.
Yeah.
Well, I played a ton of it, but I definitely didn't get into that one as much as I did Demon Souls and Dark Souls. And that was part of it. I just technically it wasn't as sound as the other ones were.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping with this remaster that it's as polished and amazing as the PC version was, because I heard that was like the way to play it.
That's
was
what I
like
heard
PC,
too. Yeah,
so.
especially because of those loading times. Bloodborne.
The load times are pretty bad on that right now.
Yeah, I think that the load times and the network difficulties that I've had are the only real complaints that I've had, and then a couple glitches here and there where like a character will go through and get stuck in a wall or go through the floor and get stuck. That's a little weird. I expect that in big games nowadays.
Yeah,
And
it doesn't bother me. It's kind of funny when it happens. You're just like,
you're just like, oh yeah, I'm playing a video game, and this is a fake world. But no, it's fucking amazing. I recommend it. Honestly, I think everyone should try it just because
it's a lot more accessible.
Understand that it's not designed like any game. It's not going to give you an easy way out. So just take your time and learn how to play the game. And there's a huge learning curve to the game. Like I still get my ass kicked, and I played it a lot. And but if you try it, give it some time, you may not like it. Like I didn't like Demon Souls the first time I played it because I'd never played a game like that before. But then with Dark Souls 2, I literally didn't know what attunement was. So I created a magic character with no attunement for like levels and levels and levels. And then I started like looking at guides and walkthroughs, and I learned how to play the game, and I just got obsessed with it. So it takes a little bit of an effort and like some actual like research. I think you don't have to do that if you know the structure. But yeah, it's awesome. The weapons are awesome.
Yeah, they're really cool. They're creative and interesting.
Yeah.
Because they could have gone just like the old sword, axe, mace route, of like the
Spear,
other Souls games. But they really like tried to come up with some cool shit that all works in interesting ways. Like every weapon has like its own little moveset of different stuff, so you can kind of experiment and find a weapon that really suits how you play the game.
Yeah. I like the Victorian era setting, and I love the little shout outs to Dark Souls, like the birds that give you pebbles, just like in Dark Souls, but you didn't fight them.
Yeah, you just talk to her or whatever, and
you'd talk to the bird, and it would get in. You would use pebbles to pay it, and then she would give you something else. You would exchange it or whatever, or you could use the pebbles somewhere else, I think, to do something.
The lady who voices the doll that levels you up, she's the same lady who voiced the Black Maiden in Demon Souls, who leveled you up like her. And so they like hired her again. I feel like Bloodborne's more of like a successor to Demon Souls than the Dark Souls games.
Well, it's the same guy.
Yeah.
Did he work on Dark Souls and Dark Souls
he did Demon Souls and Dark Souls, and then Dark Souls 2 was a different.
That's why it was so different.
From Software, but a different team. And I think it's because the other part of the team was working on Bloodborne while those guys were doing Dark Souls 2.
it's obvious that he's involved in Bloodborne because of the level design, and I think some of the boss designs. The bosses are so much more dynamic and interesting and unique, and beautiful. Like the graphics on the bosses with the like elemental stuff, or just the wind dynamics.
Or when we were fighting that boss the other day, she had so much fur coming off of her.
That one
got
was so
too close,
cool.
like you would like kind of lose yourself in it. And it was like irritating, but it's like inspiring almost at the same time. It was cool.
So, but I really like that they, and then some of the swords are pretty much just like they were in Dark Souls and stuff. But then you have the gun and you have the transformed weapons. So it's got all the great stuff that I love in Dark Souls, but it's got all this new stuff that I get to play with and new dynamics with the healing, and they streamlined a lot of stuff and didn't add too much right away that you had to sift through as far as like, oh, do I want to use this weapon, this weapon, this weapon, this weapon? They really slowly build the game up, as opposed to making it just really like variable at the beginning. You kind of have to progress through and learn what you're doing, and then you can start opening things up and getting new weapons and deciding what you want to do. I wish there was a little bit more of a ranged option. The guns are pretty I'm
kind of surprised with the guns that they didn't have like a rifle of some kind, or something,
like a crossbow with like bolts that had elemental damage to them.
People who do like the mage builds and stuff like that in the Souls games, I think are going to have a bit of a tougher time with this because you are forced essentially to play a melee character. No
blocking. Even if you have that shield, it doesn't really do very much.
I think the shield's only good for like. And when we were in that challenge dungeon the other day, where like you could block a dagger being thrown at you, so you didn't get hit by it or something. But I think they kind of threw the shield in as a joke because everybody, myself included, use shields pretty religiously in the Souls games. Like you never know what's coming up in those games, so you just walk around with a shield up almost the entire time. Like you don't know when some dude's just going to hit you out of nowhere, or a trap's going to get set off. And so I think that they were just like, well, there's a shield in the game if you really want to use it. It's total garbage, but
I think that parrying was way more difficult in the Dark Souls game. So you would have to use your shield to hit their hand away at the exact right time, and because of the frame rates, it could be weird looking. It wouldn't look right. And then with this game, they really polished up the parry, where you shoot them at the right time and you have a bigger window and multiple opportunities to do it. The backstabs, I'm not a huge fan. It feels like if I'm behind them, I should be able to do the backstab without the secondary movement.
It's weird to have to like...
But it's so powerful
it's
that
tough
they wanted to balance that, I think.
When like the enemy, if you're like coming up on an enemy who is walking, because you have to charge your R2 attack to hit them hard enough to do the visceral attack. And so it works just fine when the enemy is standing there and they're unaware. But if they're constantly like sneaking up behind people who are walking, so you gotta like, you have to get right up, just barely not touching them, and then start to charge it up so that you kind of clip them right as they're getting outside of the window, and then it still hits them. But I agree. Like the visceral attacks, I wish that you could just activate them on the fly on an unaware of enemy instead of having to
just when you're behind them. Just because it's like I'm already behind them. Why don't I just jam my hand into their back like I'm going to do in a second? But I guess it's because they have to be weakened because of the dynamic
just
that
done
they're
it is like a backstab where you just jam your sword into their fucking back if they're not paying attention. Just, not necessarily kill them, but just do a ton of damage. I feel like the visceral attacks are cool when you stagger somebody head on.
They're
with
much
like your gun, and then you just run up and just fucking tear into them. It's more such a satisfying feeling too. I just fought like one of the hunter characters to get the Lunarium key. Actually, there's this dude with like a chain whip who just assaults you, and I just fucking pinned him in the corner, and I was just blasting him with my blunderbuss and constantly stunning him, and then I would visceral attack him, and before he could get up, I was just wailing away on him again, and he killed me like a handful of times because I wasn't aggressive enough. Like that's the one thing I'm still getting used to is
you got to be aggressive, but you got to be so smart about it too.
You learn to be so calculating and patient when you're playing the Souls games. Like you hold your shield up, you kind of circle the enemy, you bide your time, you memorize their patterns, you look for the opening. And in Bloodborne, if you try to bide your time, they just gang up on you, and it's so easy to get caught off guard.
And there's so many more enemies in every area. They really throw them at you, and you have to be on your guard. I've been trying to use use the lock-on a lot less because you have so much more fluidity of movement.
Yeah, I do it less with the bosses. Like that's typically where you lock on long enough to kind of get a fix on them, and then once I start attacking, I usually will click it real quick just to get out of it so I can get away.
It's the whatever it's called, trying to get away. That's the hard part when you're locked on because it doesn't do the same rolling. It won't roll. Essentially, it just jumps back. Yeah, which I fucking hate. I don't like the jump back. I want to roll like in Dark Souls. You just roll backwards or roll to the right, left.
So I like the dash in the combat because I feel like there's a decent window of invincibility when you do it. There's been a lot of occasions where I've dashed and you can see their weapon go right through you, but that you're in that box of invisibility. So
I think it's just
invincibility.
It's just what I'm expecting. So when I do the dash, a lot of times I expect it to be, it's not as far out. It doesn't go as the distance.
You kind of have to dash like a couple of times. Yeah. Like usually like 2 dashes to kind of get out of like an explosion window or something. If they have like a radial blast that they do. Yeah. A lot of bosses have that in that game where if you get in close and hit them a few times, they'll usually do that to like get you away from them.
Yeah, that kind of AoE fucking go away thing.
That kills you in fucking one hit if you don't get out of it, basically. Like almost every time.
So do you think they've been working on it for that many years since Dark Souls 1? Because I wouldn't be surprised. The amount of work that went into this game is retarded.
I don't doubt it, just because I mean a lot of people who are building games, I think for the PS4 and Xbox One, have to spend a lot more time than normal because they're building these new game engines and learning how these new systems work, and there's so much more detail they can put into them.
Yeah.
So I mean Dark Souls 1 came out in 2009, maybe 10. No, I think it was 2011 actually, because then Dark Souls 2 came out in 2013. I remember there only being like a 2-year gap between them.
That sounds.
If you think about it, from 2011 to the beginning of 2015, that's only like a 4-year gap, which is
a good amount of time.
I feel like that's probably an average amount of time if you're working on a new engine for new hardware. Yeah. I bet you when they inevitably do a Bloodborne 2, it'll probably only take them like 2 years, maybe 3, to get that out. Now that they have like their base technology set
What are they going to call Bloodborne 2? Bloodborne again? Reborn? Reblooded?
Bloodborne? I don't know.
Bloodborne 2. Those are called Bloodborne 2. The bloodening.
I wonder if they'll do a Bloodborne 2, if they're going to like do more Dark Souls games. I'm kind of curious to see what those guys plan on doing next.
They could do a Dark Souls 3. That would be fucking crazy.
Because Sony owns the trademark for Bloodborne, so the Bloodborne's stuck on Sony consoles. So I could see them doing like a Dark Souls 3 so that they can put it on the Xbox and PlayStation.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Damn, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, they can kind of just have 2 franchises running because they're so similar, but they play so differently. Like, Bloodborne is more of like a faster paced kind of action game, whereas Dark Souls is that slower, methodical. Like you really got to think about it. Like they're so similar, but they play so differently. And then, like I said, learning to be really hyper aggressive in those games is still something I'm trying to learn because there's a lot of fights where I just get my ass handed to me, but if I just and then I can
stay in there.
If I get irritated, and I'm just like fuck it, and I just run in and I just start wailing away on them. And then suddenly I just like destroy them because
that regain system.
Yeah, the regain system.
That's something I underestimate almost all the time because I'm so afraid of dying.
Yeah.
That a lot of times if you get hit, you back up like in Dark Souls, but you're not supposed to do that unless you're being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Do it however you want, but it's like you're kind of. It's designed to get hit and hit back. It's not designed to be
hit and run. Yeah. There's a lot of times where I'll get hit and then I'll dash back and I'm like, oh fuck, I need to get back in there and hit this guy before that thing goes before the regain goes away. Yeah. So then I rush back in and then fill my health back up.
That's probably why the dash backwards or sideways doesn't get you away from them because you do that just to miss their next hit, and then you go in and you hit them because you need to regain your.
Because you can dash forward too,
and that'll work.
They have really awesome like dashing attacks, especially with like Ludwig's Holy Blade. If you're one-handing it, he'll do this like nice big like slash when you dash forward. That just leads into a really good combo to retaliate with. Yeah,
so. That's what Ian B. Epic Namebro was talking about on one of his videos. Is that while there aren't as many different types of weapon, each weapon has 6 to 9 or more or less variants as far as the combos that you can create. You have, the R1, R2, you have the R2 special move, you have on any two-handed weapon, you have the L2 becomes a third move, and then you have 2 different moves when you back up. So if you back up, hit R1, it'll do a move. If you back up and do R2, it'll do.
Yeah, because it kind of is like forward. A retaliate move where he'll like dash back
and then he'll go forward. Yeah, and then it'll do the same thing if you're running forward. If you're running with R1, R2, so you have tons of variety with each weapon set. So you can pick your weapon, upgrade it, and then play in lots of different ways.
I think that's one thing I really like that they did with this game is they went with that less is more mentality. Where there's in Dark Souls 2, there's a shit ton of armor sets and weapons and spells and miracles and hexes and just tons of stuff, which is cool. Like, it gives you this freedom to really just build a character like exactly where you want. And whereas Bloodborne, like we were saying, you can't really do ranged. There's not really that much magic in the game. There's a couple of like items that give you some kind of magical properties, but it's all based around melee. But then they give you, probably so much, 24 different weapons overall in the game. But they have all these different transformations. They have move sets, so it's like it's very easy to find something that you really get into. And I think that I would much rather have fewer weapons that have a lot of depth to them than just a shit ton of them.
Your upgrading costs a little bit more because you have the different rune kind of deals.
Yeah.
Did you ever figure out how to use a rune on yourself?
Yeah. You have to kill the Witch of Hemwick.
Oh.
And then you get the memory altar tool.
That's what it is.
And then that allows you to equip runes on yourself.
Because I have 3 of them, and I want to be able to start using them.
Yeah, once you get past her, that's something they kind of they ease
How
you
far
into.
is she into the game?
She's actually right. She's right next to the cathedral after where we killed that.
Okay.
I can't remember her name, Vakari something. But as you're coming up to the cathedral, instead of going into the cathedral, off to the left, there's this path with statues. You follow that, and then it takes you to the Witch's Chanel, which is an area with these like crazy like hag witches, which is a really like frightening area. They just like charge at you with all kinds of crazy shit.
Oh wow!
But you get through that area, and she's the boss at the end of that area, and she is the easiest boss in the game, like hands down.
Probably because it's necessary for you to be able to do the upgrade thing, so they didn't make it like crazy difficult.
I mean, I think I was over leveled for the area too because we had kind of teamed up the other night and fought other bosses that were like kind of meant for later on for her.
Really?
Yeah, she's kind of like she's like the boss you're supposed to go to after you destroy the Bloodstarved beast. Like as far as she's an optional thing. You can beat the game without fighting her. You just can't use the runes. So they recommend that after you kill the Bloodstarved beast and you're able to go to her, you go do that next so you can start using the runes. But you start finding a lot of those runes later. Like at first it's like rare things or you have to like find them by finding secret areas, but later on I already have like probably 15 or 16 different runes to use.
Nice.
So you start finding a lot of them later, but it's nice to get them. Like that should be the next thing you do in your game, honestly.
I'm going to,
because the moment you can equip those, then you get even more flexibility with your character, because there's some that give you more poison resistance, some boost your stamina 10%. And I like the blood gem stuff for the weapons too.
That's what I was talking about with the weapons.
Like then you can like add fire attributes to your weapons if you want, and I like that you can change it around.
Yeah, and they don't disappear. They don't break or anything. You can add them, subtract them, put them on this weapon, put them on that weapon.
Because it's kind of like the upgrading in the Souls games, but those cost you like, fire stones or something. Permanent. And then you couldn't reverse it. And then if you just really didn't like having a fire sword, that sword's just a fire weapon now. So you'd have to like start over with a different weapon and waste all those resources. Whereas this, you can switch it to something, fight maybe like a boss that's weak against fire, and then after you destroy that boss, like switch those runes back around. So there's a lot of flexibility that I like.
Yeah, they really changed up how you get items. You never get items like weapons and stuff, like big items, like permanent items, like outfits are not dropped by enemies, and weapons aren't dropped by enemies.
Yeah, you kind of either have to find the badges to buy them, or you just find them in the environment somewhere.
Which I like, because then it simplifies the whole process. You're not finding a new weapon and a new freaking hat every 10 minutes. You're just getting blood vials and quicksilver bullets and a few other things.
And the armor this time around too, there's not
much.
Like there's not like armor that's just amazingly better than everything else. It's like you can kind of pick the armor that you just like aesthetically, and then some of them it's like oh, there's a higher poison resistance. So if you're in an area where there's a lot of poison enemies, you can just put all that on to help a little bit. But it doesn't. And same with the weapons, the
decision making.
The weapons, the attributes for the weapons are all pretty leveled out. Like so. You don't have to worry about like a build specifically, especially because there's only 6 attributes now too. So there's not so many things to put points into. It makes decision making for your character building a little easier.
Because there's no spells, or like there's no hex, magic, and faith. There's arcane, which comes into use later. You were telling me, but it's like you kind of don't necessarily you're going to spend a lot of time on one character, and you don't necessarily have to worry about starting a certain character. Like, you can kind of pick any origin, and you'll be able to adjust how you want. And I kind of like that. It's streamlined in all the right places and really concentrates on gameplay, not a massive amount of math or a ton of like options. So
you don't spend a bunch of time in menus trying to figure out
not really.
stuff. So I like it. I like that the areas are like smaller and a lot more intricate. Like there's a lot of depth to them. Whereas like Dark Souls 2, I felt like there were a lot of areas in that game, but they were all
linear.
They were all pretty linear, and they weren't really connected. Whereas in Bloodborne, you're constantly finding shortcuts. You're like, oh, that's fucking awesome. Now I can get back here really quickly. But the kind of in lieu of that, there's a lot less of the lamps. Like, there was a lot of bonfires in Dark Souls 2, but I think that's because you were never
for one,
you were never opening shortcuts to get back to something. You were just kind of it was like you had Majula like in the center, and then you just snaked off on these ridiculous
and you would
paths.
just come back, but you could always fast travel anywhere you want. That's what like reminded me of Dark Souls 1 and reminds me of that team, because the levels are so multi-layered and maze-like, and you really have to explore the shit out of them, because there are crevices and really
like
intricate.
a few times too. And then, but what's cool is they're small enough that you learn where the enemies are. You learn how to like, oh, I need to go right here, take this left, and go this right. Like they're not so crazy that you get lost. Like, I mean, you might the first time. The Lost Woods literally holds up its name. Like I got fucking lost in that place for like 2 hours yesterday. It's so massive. It's like the biggest area in the game. It's
it's good they made one area like that to really challenge your ability to create maps in your.
But I finally like kind of know my way. Like I found landmarks, so I know where I'm at. But
the whole map thing, I think that the fact that there's no strategy guide out right now is going to give the game more longevity with the public, because you have to memorize those maps. Like there's no help. But once the strat guide comes out, people are going to be able to play the game in a different way. Slightly, especially for new people. And so I think that'll get people to build a new character. It'll get people to continue playing the game. It might get some new people playing the game because now they have the strategy guide to think about. So I kind of think it's a good idea that they waited. They're going to make it better. It's actually going to be like 500 pages, and it's going to have more content than the original strat guide. And it's not going to be a different price, so you'll be able to get the strat guide for the normal price, probably $34.99 for the collector's edition. I don't know why you would buy the regular. I don't even know if they'll have a regular edition.
They didn't do regulars for.
I don't think there's a reason to do regular editions on most games, and not anymore. People just don't buy strategy guides.
Not with the internet.
Nope.
Within a couple of weeks, you got all the information at your fingertips. So.
So that's about our time.
Cool.
I think we kind of really rambled real quick. We got a lot of information out there. So
I know.
If anybody has any questions,
so much to talk about. That game is. There's just so much to it. It's like the perfect water cooler game where like
that's what my favorite thing.
Every time I go to work, I'm just like, I gotta tell Joe about this and this, and like find out if he knows about this. I love that the developers withheld so much information about the game. Like, we're in a day and age where everything gets revealed by the internet before something comes out. You just know about half the game.
I didn't know shit. I still don't know shit.
Like they don't explain anything to you. They're just like, here's the game.
Figure it out.
Like, talk with other people who are playing it, because they're going to figure stuff out too. And I mean, so far, it's definitely my favorite game of the year. And to top it, there's going to be, there's some impressive stuff coming out. You got The Witcher and Batman.
I was going to mention The Witcher. If you like RPGs, that's probably going to be really good, well developed, great graphics. But I don't think it's going to be like Dark
It's just
Souls.
that gameplay. The gameplay is where From Software just kills it. They just know how to make a really good fucking game that just draws you in and beats your ass going. But you just come back to it every time. Like, you just take a break and you're just like, I'm not gonna let that asshole fucking beat me, fuck that. Like,
it really it you have to have a bit of resolve to fucking get through the game.
And I'm not like, when it comes to games, I'm not the most patient person, but for some reason I have the patience for this, and I think it's because I know the game isn't being unfair. I'm just approaching it wrong.
Exactly.
And so I got to figure out what I'm doing wrong. And whereas there are some games where it's just
fucked,
glitchy, and it's just bad game design, and there's nothing you can do about it.
It's really frustrating when you're like trying it a lot of different ways, and you realize that it's not you and it's the game, and you're like, well, now I can't do anything. I just don't want to play it because I don't care to deal with the game at this point. Whereas in Dark Souls, it's or Bloodborne, it's so well developed, and so much testing must go on with everything that you're just someone else has accomplished what you're trying to do, so that it's possible, and so you got to figure it out. And the water cooler thing, I love chatting about the game. It's got so much detail and so much variety, and you have so much unique experiences in it all the time. But let's finish. If anybody wants to talk about Bloodborne or has questions, they can contact us on our Twitter or email or Facebook or fucking YouTube or Libsyn. We have literally like 7 different ways you can comment or make a statement to us. And if you that's why I wanted to do 2, so that if people didn't want to listen to the Bloodborne part, they could just watch the other part. So if you want part 1 of this podcast, podcast 26, that'll be posted separately from this one. So it'll be part 1, part 2. That way people can skip this if they're not into it, or skip the first part, or just go straight to Bloodborne talk.
Or listen to both of them, because you just enjoy listening to our voices.
Well, hopefully they listen to both. So, cool. Thank you, Channing. I'm going to go turn the stuff off.
All right, well, good night, everybody. Good luck with your endeavors for the week, and we will see you next time.